guys, it's Ariana at Stories at Sunrise, and I'm here to do a new video. Today I'm wrapping up 5 books that I read all in June. The beginning of June in the first half was a really interesting reading month for me because it actually got a little bit slumpy. I had a hard time getting through the books I wanted to, though I think part of that was the books I was reading, which I will get more into in a second. So the first book I read in June was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I read this on audiobooks. I don't have a physical copy here with me. I found this book really enjoyable, and I give it 5 stars because of that. And so you now get to hear me just talk about how lovely it was and how much I loved it. So, The Poet X follows the character Xiomara, who is a Afro-Latina girl living in New York City. A lot of this book focuses on her struggles, whether it is with the Catholic Church and her issues with religion, or talking about the issues that she has within her family that cause her stress and are issues that she has to handle on a daily basis, whether she's talking about her friends or her community, and whether she's talking about falling in love for the first time. And so it's really fun to see this book because it explores the intersection of a 15-year-old girl's life. If you're looking for an introduction to verse in a novel form, I would highly recommend this book because it does a really good job. I'd never really read verse before, and so I was a little wary when I first went into it that it was going to be a weird read and I wouldn't be able to follow it that well, but I actually found that it was really well done. You can tell Elizabeth Acevedo is someone who does slam poetry because she not only explores how slam poetry is really helpful, she does that really well, but she also uses verse in a really interesting way to help move the story forward instead of holding it back, which I think was my initial concern, was that the format of the book would make the book harder to read. If you're looking for a book that has representation, if you're looking for a book that does verse really well and in a really engaging way, or if you're just looking for a hopeful contemporary, I would highly recommend this book because it does an amazing job. The second book I've read in June was Queen of the Tearling by Erika Johansen, and I don't have a copy of this book right now because I returned it to the library, and I gave this book 3 stars. And I will say before I kind of get into what this book is about, this book is probably the reason I had the reading slump. So this book follows Kelsey Raleigh as the princess and heir to the throne of the Kingdom of Tyr, thus Queen of the Tearling. And at the beginning of the book, it is revealed that she's now of age, and the book starts out with her leaving her 2 adoptive parents that raised her whole life, and heading to the castle where she begins her rule as Queen of the Tyr, a medieval-esque kingdom with powerful neighbors. And so her main foe is the Red Queen, living in a different country, whose name is escaping me now, what the country is called. That's fine. And so she has to deal with forces outside of her kingdom, such as the Red Queen, as well as forces inside her kingdom, like her uncle, for example, who doesn't want her to rule. So this book is interesting. I think my initial problem with Queen of the Tearling was the world, actually, that it was set in. Erika Johansen takes real-world historical events and events outside of, that are fantastical and combines them together. And there's nothing wrong with that, inherently. But I found it really hard to follow what was going on from a historical perspective because it wasn't exactly clear how she chose the parts that were real and that were fantastical and mashed them together. Because, for example, it talks a lot about, they crossed the ocean and there was, these religious settlers. And so I had a hard time following, okay, so this is America, kind of? No, never mind, it's not America, okay. So I had a lot of issues understanding what she was talking about from a world perspective just because I couldn't follow the story. And the other thing that I had a hard time with initially when I read the story was I had a hard time with the pacing, actually. The pacing of this book I found a little jarring, just because it was really fast at the beginning, and then it came slow, 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 and then it spiked again. And so it was better after probably the first 80, 90 pages, but it was just hard to follow because the pacing wasn't very clear to me. So that was a hard thing. But I did enjoy most of the characters. Kelsey is okay. Like, she's an interesting character to follow. Mace is an interesting character. You follow another palace guard in this book, and he's probably more interesting to me than Kelsey is. So the characters themselves are interesting. I just had a hard time with the plot and the world. And since this is a fantasy setting where the world and the politics are very important, not understanding it well did make it a hard read, and that's why this book took me so long to read. It is a longer book, particularly for YA, but I still found it really slow for me just because I struggled to get into it. And so that's why I gave this book 3 stars, and I won't be continuing with this series. The next book I read was The Brilliant Death by Amy Rose Capetta. I found this book to be a really interesting read. Again, I gave it 3.5 stars. The Brilliant Death is set in Venalia, which is a country that's essentially Italy in its government's culture and language, that has 5 nobles that rule the provinces, and then, of course, there's an emperor in the central city. And so in this book, there are magical people, and our main character, Theodora, is a Strega, a person with magic, who can turn people into things or things into other things. Basically, she can just make things transform. And so in the beginning of this book, she's hiding her magical powers because there aren't really many Strega left, and so she's afraid that she'll be used and abused and taken. And so that's a struggle for her, and she's using her powers as the second daughter of the head of one of the noble families to help her family, the DeSangro family, keep rule over their little province. But at the beginning of the book, she meets this Strega named Cielo, who can change his own form, and so because of that, he goes from male to female. He can also turn into objects and creatures and all sorts of things. And so when she meets Cielo, she's like, wow, I want to learn more about my Strega abilities. And so she searches him out, and that's one part. And then at the same time, all of the heads of the 5 ruling families of the provinces, they're all poisoned, and her father included. And so she ends up traveling to the capital, disguised as a boy, to protect her family, save her father, and hopefully help the kingdom in the meantime. So, just as I don't think this is a spoiler, there's a lot of discussion because of the fact that Cielo is, I believe, is formally classified as gender fluid in this book, and then there's a lot of discussion about Theodora and her gender identity in this book. So if that's something you're interested in seeing in fantasy, because I know that was something that interested me initially, definitely look at this book. I found the world and the magic system of A Brilliant Death to be really interesting. The Strega magic system is quite unique, and it's something I would highly recommend if you're looking for something that's a little bit of a twist on the normal magic system that you see in a lot of fantasy books currently. The plot be very fast-paced and on point. So if you're looking for a book that moves along quite speedily, I would recommend this book as well. The one thing I found lacking in this book was I found that the characters weren't super well developed. I had a hard time relating to Cielo just because it felt like we didn't see enough of this Strega character, aside from it being like, oh, I love you, you're so awesome. I don't think that's a spoiler. And so I had a hard time connecting with the characters. It was mostly the plot that drove me through this story, not the characters themselves. And because of this, I don't see myself picking up the next book. I thought it was a really enjoyable read, but I'm satisfied with where I left the characters now that the plot's over, so I don't see myself returning to it. 4th book I read for Buzzwordathon, the only book I technically read for Buzzwordathon, is As You Like It by William Shakespeare. This is a reread for me. I read this for university, my English course in the fall. As You Like It is probably my favorite Shakespeare play that I've read /seen. And so I had a really good time. It was nice seeing Rosalind again, seeing the old gender wolf switcheroos. I really enjoyed seeing this book again from just a lens of enjoyment instead of I need to write a paper on this. So it was really a fun time to go back to this. My thoughts haven't really changed. Still Shakespeare, so it's still complicated. It's still good. The book I read in June was P.S. I Like You by Casey West. So I've never read any Casey West books, and this I think was a pretty good start. I gave this book 4 stars. This book follows Lily, a high school student in Arizona, where she really hates chemistry, and so she likes to write her song lyrics, because she loves to write songs, in her chemistry class. And so her teacher, unsurprisingly, gets annoyed at this and tells her that no, she can't do that anymore. She can only have one piece of paper to write notes on, and from now on she has to show him at the end of class her notes. So, because she can't imagine the idea of going through chemistry class without gazing off into space, she decides to write song lyrics on her desk. And so, when she comes in the next day, Lily discovers that someone has replied to her with the notes on her desk. And so, she ends up getting an anonymous pen pal on her desk, and she doesn't know who it is. And so, as they start to communicate back and forth, she finds out more about this person. She's like, well, I want to know who this person is. And there's a whole drama about who is her anonymous pen pal, who is writing to her, and what is going on. This is a really fun book. I gave it, again, 4 stars, and I think it's a really sweet little fluffy YA contemporary romance book. The plot of this book is not shocking at all, and the tropes used in this book are pretty standard. You've got, like, I won't say, because if I tell you the main trope of this book, it's kind of spoils it even more, but very standard tropes are used in this book. I would not recommend this for someone who has read all of the YA contemporary romances, because you probably would get bored with this book. But it was a fun little book. The characters were very endearing. Lily's family is adorable. I loved her family. Probably the hijinks with her family was my favorite part of the book. She has a nice friend. Friend is not super exciting, but her friend is solid. And the romance in this book is pretty darn cute. If you're looking for a literary masterpiece, this is not for you. But if you're looking for something cutesy and summery and just to kind of get to feeling all the feels, I would recommend this book because it's adorable. So those are 5 books that I read in the first half of June. I'm planning to do a second at the end of June, wrapping up the books I read in the second half of this month. And it's good. I hope I do better in the second half of the month than I did in the first half, but we'll see. I'm really excited. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll talk to you guys later.